I lost everything in a single moment. My job, my identity, my future. The rain fell, and with it, my tears. I sat on a lonely park bench, a failure in the eyes of the world, a ghost in my own life. And then he appeared, a total stranger, a man who saw not my tears, but my pain. He didn't offer me money or pity. He offered me a tissue, a simple kindness that changed everything. My despair was my beginning, and my rock bottom was the place where I found my destiny, my strength, and a love I never thought was possible. My life was a timeline, a perfect path from one promotion to the next. At 27, I was an assistant manager at a prestigious marketing firm, a position I had sacrificed my youth and my sanity to achieve. I was a workaholic, a woman who lived for deadlines and board meetings. My friends were my colleagues. My social life was the office happy hour, and my purpose was my career. I believed that success was the only thing that mattered, and I was on my way to the top. I was building a beautiful, flawless life, and I had no time for anything else. My boss, a cold and ruthless man named Director Park, was a constant source of pressure. He was a man who saw his employees as cogs in a machine, not as human beings. I worked tirelessly to impress him, staying late, taking on extra projects, and sacrificing my weekends for the company. My colleagues saw me as a rival, a woman who was obsessed with her career, and my ex-boyfriend, a man who loved my success more than me, was a constant reminder of how far I had come. I was proud of my life. I was proud of my success. And I was proud of the woman I had become. The day it all fell apart was a Tuesday. It was raining, a gray, miserable day that seemed to mirror the gray, miserable feeling in my heart. Director Park called me into his office, and his face was a mask of cold professionalism. He didn't even look at me in the eyes. "Yuna," he said, his voice a low, emotionless drone. "Due to corporate restructuring, we have to let you go. Your position has been eliminated." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My life, my purpose, my identity, it was all gone. Just like that. I left the office, a ghost in my own body. The world was a blur of gray and black. The rain was a cold shower of shame. I didn't know where I was going. My feet were moving on their own, taking me far from the glass tower that was my life. I found myself in a public park, a place I had never been before. I sat on a cold, wet bench, and the tears came, a silent, hot torrent of shame, frustration, and sadness. I cried for my job, for my life, for the woman I used to be. I was a failure. I was a ghost. I was nothing. I just wanted to disappear, to vanish into the rain and the mud. I just wanted to be alone. I was in the middle of a private, painful moment, a public display of my own despair. I wanted the world to disappear, but the world, it seemed, was here to stay. People walked by, their faces a blur of indifference. They didn't see me. They didn't see my pain. They saw a woman crying on a bench, a common sight in the city. But then, I felt a presence, a warm, silent presence. I looked up, and I saw him. A man, a stranger, was standing in front of me. He had a kind face with deep, soulful eyes that held a strange, knowing look. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He just stood there, holding an umbrella over my head, protecting me from the rain. He then knelt down and handed me a tissue, a simple but profound gesture that made my heart ache. I took the tissue, my hand trembling. He didn't say anything. He just sat down on the bench a few feet away from me and looked at the rain. He didn't look at me. He just sat there, a silent statue of kindness. The silence was a comfort, a welcome change from the noise of my own mind. I stopped crying. My tears, which had been a torrent of shame, were now a quiet trickle. The air was filled with the sound of the rain, the sound of the leaves, the sound of a silent understanding. He looked at me, and he smiled. A small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "The rain," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble, "has a beautiful sound, doesn't it?" I was stunned. I was expecting a question, a pity, a look of judgment. But he just talked about the rain. He talked about the sound of the water, the way the leaves danced in the wind. He talked about the way the world looked after a good cry. His words were not a conversation. They were a balm. I found myself talking, not about my job, but about my life, about my dreams, my fears, my loneliness. I told him about my life, a life that was so obsessed with success that it had no room for anything else. He listened with a patience that I had never experienced. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just listened. He saw the person beneath the crying, the person who was lost and alone. And in that moment, I was no longer a ghost. I was a person again. The next few days were a blur of tears and sadness. My life, which was once a perfect timeline, was now a blank page. I had no job, no purpose, no identity. My phone was silent except for a few messages from my family, who were more worried about my reputation than my well-being. My ex-boyfriend, a man who had loved my success more than me, called me, not to console me, but to break up with me. "Yuna," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion, "I can't be with a woman who has no future. You don't fit into my plans anymore." The words were a final blow, a final confirmation that I was alone. I was a failure. I was at my lowest. I was in a dark place, a place of despair and hopelessness. I was ready ready to give up, but then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hope you're having a better day. The sun is out, and the world is waiting for you." The message was from him, the man from the park, Hyunwoo. I was stunned. I had no idea how he got my number, but I was so starved for a connection that I didn't care. I texted him back, "How did you get my number?" His response was simple, "I have my ways." He then told me he was a writer and that he had a few friends in common with me, and he had found my number from one of them. He then told me that he was working on a book about a person who finds their purpose after losing everything. It was a strange coincidence. He was a complete stranger, but he was the only person who saw me. He was the only person who cared. Our conversations became a lifeline. We talked about everything. He told me about his life, about his love for words, about his passion for capturing the truth behind a person's eyes. He told me that he was a successful writer, but that he was also a lonely man who found solace in observing people from a distance. He saw the world in a way I had never seen before. He saw the beauty in broken things. He saw the hope in a moment of despair. He saw the person behind the pain. He introduced me to a new world. A world of quiet cafes, of old bookstores, of long walks in the park. He taught me to live in the moment, to appreciate the simple things, to find joy in the small details of life. I was no longer a person who lived for the future. I was a person who lived for the present. And in that present, I was happy. I was no longer a ghost. I was a person again. I was Yuna, and I was on my way to a new life. My life was no longer a timeline. It was a blank page, and I was ready to write a new story. I was not going to go back to my old life. I was not going to go back to a world that was so obsessed with success that it had no room for humanity. I was ready to find a new purpose, a new passion, a new life. Hyunwoo was a constant presence in my life. He was not just my friend, he was my mentor. He taught me to see the world in a new light. He taught me to see the beauty in imperfection, to find joy in the mundane, to find strength in vulnerability. He taught me that success was not a destination, but a journey. He taught me that a person's value was not measured by their job title, but by their heart. He was a constant source of inspiration, a constant source of hope. He was a person who saw me for who I was, not for what I did. He was a person who loved me for being me. My new life was not without its challenges. My mother, a woman who was obsessed with my success, was furious. She couldn't understand why I was not looking for a new job. She couldn't understand why I was spending my time with a writer. She wanted me to go back to my old life. She wanted me to be a success, but I couldn't. I was a different person now. I had a new purpose, a new passion, a new life. Hyunwoo was the one person who understood. He was a constant source of support, a constant source of love. He was the one person who believed in me, who saw my potential, who fought for me. He was the one person who was on my side. I decided to look for a new job, but this time, I was not looking for a job that would make me rich or famous. I was looking for a job that would make me happy. I was looking for a job that would give me a purpose. I had a job interview with a small creative agency. I was excited. I was nervous. I was ready to face the world. But my old life was not going to let me go that easily. My rival from my old company, a woman named Yoonji, was working at the new agency. She saw me, and her face was a mask of contempt. She was a woman who was obsessed with success, with power, with money. She was a woman who was a constant reminder of my old life. She was a woman who was going to try to bring me down. I knew it. I could feel it, and I was ready to fight. The job interview was going well. I was confident. I was articulate. I was being myself. I was talking about my passion for marketing, my love for creativity, my desire to make a difference. The interviewer, a kind and intelligent man, was impressed. I was in my element. I was living my dream. I was a person again. But then Yoonji walked in. Her face was a mask of fake smiles and quiet contempt. She was here to sabotage me. She was here to bring me down. She looked at me, and her eyes were full of a quiet rage. "I'm so glad to see you again, Yuna," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "I'm so glad to see you're still looking for a job. I heard about your little scandal. It's a shame. You were so close to the top." The words were a punch, a final blow. My heart was pounding. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't. I had to fight. The interviewer, a man who was clearly uncomfortable with the situation, was about to end the interview. He was about to tell me that he would get back to me. He was about to tell me that I was not the right fit. But then I felt a presence, a warm, familiar presence. I looked up and I saw him, Hyunwoo. He was standing in the doorway, a look of determination on his face. He walked in and took my hand. "I'm sorry for the intrusion," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But I have something to say. Yuna is not a failure. She is the most intelligent, the most dedicated, the most talented person I know. She is a woman who has been through hell, and she has come back stronger. She is a woman who has a purpose, a passion, a dream. She is a woman who will change the world. The interviewer was stunned. He was speechless. He didn't know what to say. He looked at Hyunwoo and he recognized him. He was a fan of his work. He was a fan of his books. He was a fan of his stories. Hyunwoo was a legend in the world of literature. He was a genius. He was a man who had changed the world. Hyunwoo looked at the interviewer, his eyes full of a quiet dignity. A person's worth, he said, is not measured by their job title, but by their heart. A person's value is not measured by their success, but by their humanity. Yuna is a true hero, and a true hero deserves a chance. The words were a final blow. The interviewer was defeated. He was impressed. He was in awe. The job was mine. Hyunwoo had saved me again. He had saved me from myself, from my past, from my fears. He had given me a new life, a new purpose, a new passion. He had given me a future. With my new job, my new life, my new love, I was a different person. I was no longer a person who lived for the future. I was a person who lived for the present. I was no longer a person who was obsessed with success. I was a person who was obsessed with happiness. I was no longer a person who was afraid of the world. I was a person who was ready to face the world. My relationship with Hyunwoo was a constant source of joy. He was my partner, my best friend, my love. We were two souls who had found each other in the chaos of life. We were two outcasts who had found a home in each other's hearts. We were a team. We were a dream. We were a revolution. But our love was not without its challenges. Hyunwoo's family, a wealthy and traditional family, was not happy. They wanted him to marry a woman from their social class. They wanted him to marry a woman who was a success, a woman who had a future. They didn't understand. They didn't see the love. They just saw the difference in our status, the difference in our worlds. Hyunwoo, a man who was always so quiet and reserved, stood up to his family. He told them that he loved me and that he was not going to leave me. He told them that I was the woman he was going to marry. His words were a warning, a threat. His family was defeated. They had lost. They had lost their son, but they had gained a daughter. They had lost their pride, but they had gained a family. They had lost a dream, but they had gained a reality. I was a woman who had lost everything, but I had found everything. I had found a job that I loved, a purpose that I cherished, a life that I was proud of, and most of all, I had found a love that was stronger than anything. I was no longer a person who was defined by her job. I was a person who was defined by her love. I was Yuna, and I was happy. Hyunwoo, a man who had always been so lonely and reserved, was a new person. He was a man who was filled with love, with laughter, with joy. He was a man who had found his purpose, his passion, his life. He was a man who was no longer alone. He was a man who was in love. He was a man who was happy. Our life was a symphony of love, of laughter, of joy. We were not rich, but we were happy. We were not famous, but we were in love. We were not a perfect couple, but we were a real one. Our story was a story of hope, of redemption, of fighting for your dreams. It was a story of a love that was stronger than anything. It was a story of a woman who lost everything, but who found everything. The final chapter of our story was a quiet, private moment. We were in the same park where we had met, sitting on the same bench. The sun was shining, and the world was beautiful. He looked at me and his eyes were full of love. "Yuna," he said, his voice a whisper. "You are not just my love. You are my home. You are my life. You are my everything." The words were a promise, a vow. I hugged him, and the tears came. "I love you too, Hyunwoo," I said, my voice a whisper. "You saved me. You gave me my life back. You gave me a reason to fight. You gave me everything." Our life was a dream that we had built with our own hands, with our own hearts. Our story was not a fairy tale. It was a real story, a story of two people who were meant to be, a story of a love that was stronger than anything. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Thank you for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel for a new episode every day. We'll be waiting for you. See you in the next story.